When news reached Rome in 53 BC that Marcus Licinius Crassus had fallen at the Battle of Karai, the city panicked. Besides taking the lives of so many men, the Parthians had also taken the 7 eagle standards from Rome's 7 fallen legions. The eagle was a symbolic bird representing Jupiter. It had been Gaius Marius who assigned the eagle standards to Rome's legions, and for a legion to lose its eagle was tantamount to the loss of Rome's major god. Apart from being a bad omen, it was a point of disgrace to the Romans. Until such time as the lost eagles were rescued, Rome could not replace those fallen legions. For Publius Clodius Pulcher, the loss was even more personal. Marcus Licinius Crassus, in partnership with Julius Caesar, had not only discreetly funded Publius Clodius's leadership of Roman gangs from the city's various collegia, but Crassus had been his protector as well. By using his well-placed people within government, Crassus had paid out bribes whenever Clodius was dragged through the courts. With Crassus behind him, Publius Clodius had free rein to torment Pompeius Magnus and stifle the arrogant general's every agenda. But now, with Crassus dead and Caesar still in Gaul, Pompeius Magnus was the most prominent man within the Roman Empire. And though his proconsular imperium prohibited him from entering within the city's sacred boundary by living in his villa on the Mons Pincius or Pincian Hill, which was just the other side of the boundary, Pompeius was close enough to Rome to keep his hand in the senatorial till. Publius Clodius had successfully delayed the 53 BC elections, following the resolution of the scandal involving the consuls. In so doing, he had prevented Pompeius's ally and former brother-in-law Marcus Aemilius Scaurus from winning election to the 53 BC consulship, where Scaurus was expected to immediately push the Senate into voting Pompeius Magnus dictator of Rome. But now, Titus Annius Milo, the leader of the opposing gangs, supported by Senate conservatives, announced he would run for the 53 BC consulship. Publius Clodius, who was himself running for the 53 BC praetorship, could not let that happen. Without Crassus to discreetly divide Senate conservatives, Milo could potentially win. And if Milo won, then Publius Clodius's praetorship would be impotent. Once again, violence erupted between the two gangs, and elections were continually postponed throughout the second half of the 53 BC year, and into the next year. On the 18th of January of the 53 BC year, Publius Clodius, travelling toward Rome with an entourage of about 30 armed slaves, passed the party of Titus Annius Milo on the Via Appia, just outside the town of Bovillae. Milo, travelling with his usual train of hired gladiators, as well as his wife, Fausta Cornelia, daughter of the late dictator Sulla, was heading to the town of Lanuvium, southeast of Rome, where Milo was to install a priest within one of the town's temples. The two parties almost succeeded in passing each other without incident, until Clodius allegedly gave one of Milo's gladiators a dirty look. In response, the gladiator named Berea threw his javelin through Clodius's shoulder. As Clodius was carried, screaming, to a nearby inn, a fight broke out between his armed slaves and Milo's gladiators. After his experienced gladiators dispatched Clodius's slaves, Milo, not wanting to give his worst political enemy the power to convict him by being the sole witness to his crime, ordered his gladiators to finish the job. Dragged from the inn with a spear through his shoulder, Publius Clodius Pulcher was beaten to death on the Via Appia, the very road built by one of his ancestors. To ensure no one could identify his mangled body, Milo removed Clodius's senatorial ring before continuing his journey to Lanuvium. Unfortunately for Milo, another senator travelling the Via Appia that day happened across the scene. From his obscure position, Sextus Tiberius witnessed everything. After Milo and his group had gone, Tiberius ordered Publius Clodius's corpse be transported back to Rome. By around 7 p.m. in the evening, word of Clodius's death was spreading. The atrium of his palatial Palatine villa was bursting with close family, friends, patrons, and even senators. Clodius's widow, Fulvia, incited the mourners to even greater sympathy and anger by stripping off Clodius's clothes in front of everyone, displaying his deadly wounds for all to see. In the Forum Romanum, people who had benefited from Clodius's laws began gathering, camping throughout the night. By morning, the crowd had grown so large that Fulvia's home was completely surrounded. 2 tribunes of the plebs who had been friends with Clodius exhorted the crowd to carry Claudius's body into the Forum Romanum. Still naked and with unwashed wounds, his corpse was taken down into the Forum, where it was laid out on the rostra. As the mourners passed, viewing the body and offering condolences to Fulvia, the 2 tribunes of the plebs, named Titus Munatius Plancus and Quintus Pompeius Rufus, stirred up the crowd with angry invectives directed at Titus Annius Milo for committing murder. After the people had paid their respects, Clodius's corpse was carried into the Senate house. Smashing chairs and benches, the people built a funeral pyre in the middle of the room. After placing the body atop the makeshift pyre, the flames were lit. The fire quickly spread to engulf the whole of the Senate house, and a portion of the attached Basilica Portia, which had been built by Cato the Elder in 184 BC, and had since served as the meeting place of the tribunes of the plebs. As the buildings burned, the outraged mob charged to the home of Titus Annius Milo. Milo lived on the southwest slope of the Palatine facing the Circus Maximus. Although Milo and Fausta had not yet returned from Lanuvium, his guards successfully restrained the mob from invading their home. Next, the crowd stormed to the temple of Libitina. Fighting their way in against the guards, the people stole the consular fasces, which had been stored there, as no new consuls had yet been elected for the year. Carrying the consular fasces, the mob charged to the homes of Milo's consular opponents, Scipia Nascia and Hypsaeus, intending to award them the still vacant consulship. Then, changing their collective mind, they marched to the garden villa belonging to Pompeius Magnus on the Pincian Hill. First, they tried to force Pompeius to accept the fasces, and by doing so the consulship. Then they began calling, instead, for Pompeius to make himself dictator of Rome. After rummaging around the city, the throng then returned to the Forum Romanum, where the Senate house and Basilica Portia were still burning. As the sun set, the assemblage held a funeral feast for Publius Clodius amidst the smouldering buildings. Various friends and patrons provided food from their homes. Shopkeepers who had benefited from Clodius's legislation also donated food for the feast. The following day, the Senate met in a vacant temple to discuss the demands of Clodius's rampaging funeral crowd, who had finally settled on trying to force Pompeius Magnus to accept the office of dictator. Many in the Senate were willing to offer Pompeius the dictatorship, but Cato, who still remembered Rome's last dictator, opposed the motion. Others suggested holding the normal consular elections and just letting whomever won settle events in the city. But few had confidence that anyone other than Pompeius Magnus could calm the explosive situation in Rome. By the end of the day, the Senate had succeeded only in electing an interrex. The duty of the interrex was to require and oversee elections within a 5-day period. The man chosen as interrex was Manius Aemilius Lepidus. As soon as the interrex was elected, a group who supported the candidates Scipia Nascia and Hypsaeus besieged his home, trying to force him to hold elections immediately. They beat their way past Lepidus's guards and made their way inside his villa. Once inside, they smashed the wax funerary masks of Lepidus's ancestors, which traditionally hung on the atrium wall. Rushing wildly through the house, they also destroyed pieces of furniture which belonged to Manius's wife, Cornelia. When the supporters of Milo arrived at the home of Manius Aemilius Lepidus, intending to trap him and pressure him to hold elections, they unexpectedly ran into the supporters of Milo's consular opponents. Another fight broke out between the two factions, which inadvertently saved Lepidus and Cornelia. Finally, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus suggested a reasonable solution. The consular elections could not be held if the opponent's supporters meant to kill one another. Cato and others who belonged to the ultra-conservative senatorial faction, known as the Boni, would have no dictator, no matter how necessary his services might seem. But only Pompeius Magnus had the strength, eminence, and support of the people to be able to return Rome to some semblance of normality. Bibulus suggested that Pompeius Magnus be elected to the consulship without a co-consul. In this way, he would have the authority as consul to dictate what needed to be done, but, unlike a dictator, was still answerable to the Senate, who had the power to vote against his methods if they were deemed too severe. Lacking any other solutions, the Boni accepted this compromise. The Senate gathered and journeyed to Pompeius's garden villa on the Pincian Hill. There they implored him to assume the consulship. Pompeius, after years of being tormented by the gangs of Publius Clodius, finally got what he wanted. It might not be the dictatorship, but it was a start. The death of Marcus Licinius Crassus in Syria had rendered Publius Clodius suddenly vulnerable. Without Crassus, Clodius lasted only months, brought cruelly to his end by Milo, a man who belonged to Pompeius, standing before the assembly that had gathered in front of his villa and announcing that, if there is no other way, Pompeius Magnus became Rome's first consul without a colleague.